Hi everybody, and welcome back to Tuesdays with Tuesday. I'm Tuesday and I write fantasy fiction under the name Mary E. Twomey. Today we're going to be reading Chapter 12 of Taste, which is Book 9 in the Tearaway series. If you haven't read the previous 11 chapters, this isn't going to make a whole lot of sense to you. But if you just like being read to and you don't care what's being read, then join us. Chapter 12, Blind and Bloody. I began to understand why animals peed themselves under extreme duress. I was on the verge. Vaughn attacked from behind her, and Ezra flew in from the foyer. The two pummeled Tonga's tall form to the ground with many manly grunts, pinning her down on her back. Leaping out of the pantry, I ignored the guy's protest for me to stay put, and ran toward Tonga's head, through the angry flock of moths that exploded on me in little annoying puffs. They seemed to be controlled by her rage, of which she had an endless supply. Tonga opened her long razor teeth and uttered an ominous "Gumising anak na babe ng kamatian." I loved the horror movies that had evil spells in them, and she was totally ruining it for me. "Whatever," I murmured as I popped the top off the tub of cayenne pepper I'd stashed in my pocket. "Get back!" Ezra shouted to me. He tried to stab Tonga without getting pierced himself with her armored nails. She swiped at Ezra's face, gouging him across the jaw. He fell back in shock, holding his chin. "Ah!" I punched Tonga hard on her nose, doing my part to keep her away from Ezra. I assumed he was the good guy in this situation, though really it was anyone's guess. The kitchen was in pandemonium, as moths swarmed toward their master, pelting us like tiny dust bullets that exploded all over in a haze of disgusting chaos. They tried to somehow help their master by pissing us off, and darn it, it was working. "Hold her head down, Vaughn!" I yelled, trying to stay on point even after 7 moths flew in my mouth. I spat them out, refusing to freak out until it was all over. I centered myself as much as I could with the mantra Ali had made me say over and over. Life is messy, and that's okay. I knew for sure there were no moths in my bedroom back home, so I forced the germs and the powdery guts from my mind and put myself back in the action. If that one room was clean, then the rest of my life could be a little messy and I could deal. That was the theory anyway. The second Vaughn slammed Tonga's other wrist into the linoleum, I dumped half the contents of the bottle out over her black eyes. On instinct, Tonga blinked, just as I'd wanted her to. The powder settled itself into her eyeballs, forcing a terrified scream to erupt from her mouth. I took my opening and dumped the other half of the tub into her mouth, wincing as her razor-sharp teeth snapped at me like a shark as she choked the hot spice into her lungs. Vaughn was sweating, and his hands were having a hard time keeping the witch properly pinned. The moths were pelting us, making me blanch. Tonga was on the defensive for the moment, but I guessed the small advantage I'd bought us would be short-lived, not unlike us if we didn't hold on to the upper hand. "Here, I can help." I knelt on shaking legs to the bug-littered floor of the kitchen, holding one of Tonga's razor hands down with my knee while I pinched down on a pressure point between her shoulder and neck. She screamed impossibly louder, and Vaughn shot me an appreciative look. Despite the confusion and chaos that had stolen my sanity, Vaughn gazed at me like I was something amazing. "Did you just blind her?" Vaughn asked over Tonga's screams. "Temporarily. I bought you two some time, so sort out your shiz!" I motioned to Ezra, who had blood dripping down his chin. Ezra's face was awash in horror and regret at seeing me kneeling atop the writhing bug witch's arm on the floor, while Vaughn wrestled the other half of her. Mason barreled in like a Viking, ready for a whole mess of killing. He clutched a long knife in his hand that was already dripping with thick red blood. "Move back, girl," Vaughn groaned. "So much blood." Ezra held out his palm to me, his hand steady, though his breathing was not. "October, close your eyes, dear." "A little too late for that," I chided the grown man. "And if I let her go, she'll come after you, Mason. Do what you gotta do and be done with it." "You have to do it. I can help you," Mason explained. I let out a pathetic noise of distress when his hand molded mine around the weapon. Mason caught my eye and nodded as he raised the long machete he had clutched in our joined hands. "Thank you for your sacrifice," he said to Tonga, in what can only be described as a respectful tone. Then, before I could run through the list of life sentences this would get me in a court of law, we plunged the blade downward into the thrashing woman. I whimpered, and the sound rang of inexperience. I'd witnessed a great many crap fests in my day, but I'd never held a woman down while a Viking and I stabbed her through. I didn't totally understand why I was helping them. Or maybe I did, but didn't want this to be how it all went down. The moths swarming around us started flying as if they'd had one too many at the bar. Their drunken flight paths were easy to intercept with a bat of a hand, and many started to flop to the ground in defeat, now that their leader was on her way to her last breath. Sure enough, the red came bubbling out from Tonga's crusty gown, spilling out onto the floor of the kitchen, staining the linoleum. That was the tipping point for my whines of distress to mutate into screams of horror. That ends chapter 12 for us. I can't wait to see you next Tuesday, and I'll read you chapter 13 on Tuesdays with Tuesday. Have a good week.